All right, so get this. We're diving deep into Duolingo today.
Duolingo, okay.
But not just the app everyone knows and loves. Like, we're going behind the scenes, into the company itself, through their handbook. Version 1.0.0. It's like getting a sneak peek into the minds behind global phenomenon. What I found fascinating is that it's packed with insights that apply whether you're building a company, leading a team, or even just trying to learn more effectively.
That's right. And it all starts with their mission statement: develop the best education in the world and make it universally available.
It's a bold statement, for sure. But what struck me is that it's not just empty words. They actually walk the walk.
Absolutely. It's ingrained in everything they do. Take the long view principle, for instance. Most companies are obsessed with short-term profits. But Duolingo is playing a different game. They deliberately limit ads, even though it could mean more revenue right now.
Which seems counterintuitive. I mean, who wouldn't want more money?
Yeah.
But how does that tie into the long view?
It's all about the user experience. They know bombarding users with ads would hurt their learning experience in the long run. So they're prioritizing long-term engagement over quick cash. It's a risky move, but it shows they're serious about their mission.
Okay, that's really making me rethink my own tendency to go for the quick win. Good reminder to sometimes zoom out and see the bigger picture. Now, another thing that caught my eye was their approach to technology. Wouldn't you say it's pretty unique?
Definitely. They're not afraid to bet on the future, even if it means using unconventional methods. In the early days, they actually used robotic text-to-speech instead of human voices.
Really? I never knew that. But why would they do that? Surely human voices would have been better, right?
Well, at the time, the robotic voices were rough around the edges, but they had this unwavering belief that the technology would improve, and they were willing to be patient. And of course they were right. Text-to-speech technology has advanced by leaps and bounds since then.
That's such a powerful lesson. Sometimes we get stuck in the present and are afraid to take a chance on what might be possible down the line. It takes a certain kind of courage to embrace the unknown like that. Okay, shifting gears a bit. Let's talk about their hiring process. It sounds intense.
Oh, it is. They have this saying, better a hole than an asshole, basically.
Yeah.
They'd rather have an open position than hire someone who's brilliant but unkind.
I love that. It speaks volumes about their values. But how they actually put this into practice? I mean, everyone says they want nice people, but it's harder to actually measure that, isn't it?
They go to extreme lengths.
Yeah.
There's a story in the Handbook about them passing on a senior executive who was rude to a driver. And this was after a year-long search. They were willing to wait for the right person who embodied their values, even for such a crucial role.
Wow. A whole year. That's dedication. It really makes you think about the trade-offs we make in our own hiring decisions. Do we prioritize skills over character? Or are we truly looking for people who are both talented and good human beings? It's a tough question, but clearly Duolingo has a strong stance on that. And this focus on people seems to extend to their approach
To building their product as well.
Exactly. They're not interested in quick fixes or fleeting trends. They want to build a forever product, something that people will use for years, not just for a few weeks.
Okay. I'm intrigued. How do they actually translate that into their product development process? It's not just about saying, you want a forever product, right?
Yeah.
What concrete steps do they take?
Well, think about the streak, for example. It's a simple concept, but it's become incredibly effective at keeping users engaged. It taps into our natural desire for achievement and consistency. And then there's the introduction of the path, which prioritized true learning over quick progress. They weren't afraid to potentially lose some users in the short term if it meant creating a better learning experience. In the long run, that's pretty bold. Most companies are terrified of losing users, even for a little while. So they prioritize features that might give a quick dopamine hit, but don't actually lead to long-term engagement. Duolingo seems to be doing the opposite. It's almost like they're playing a different game altogether. And speaking of doing things differently, this whole raising the bar concept caught my attention. What's that all about?
It's their philosophy on continuous improvement. They're constantly pushing themselves to do better, but always with kindness at the core. They understand that excellence doesn't have to come at the cost of a toxic work environment.
So it's not about being ruthless or cutthroat. It's about creating a culture where people feel supported to do their best work while also challenging them to grow.
Precisely. And that translates into their product development process as well. They don't believe in MVPs or minimum viable products. Instead, they aim for V1s, which are polished and well thought out, right from the start.
Wait, explain that a little more. What's the difference between a V1 and an MVP, and why is that distinction important?
An MVP is all about getting something out there quickly, even if it's rough around the edges.
Yeah.
The goal is to test the waters and see what resonates with users. A V1, on the other hand, is a more complete and polished version. It's still a first version, but it's built to a higher standard. Duolingo believes that by putting their best foot forward from the beginning, they're creating a better experience for their users and setting a higher bar for themselves.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like they're saying, we're not just going to throw something out there and see what sticks. We're going to put in the effort to make it great from day one. It's a different mindset for sure, and it seems to be working for them.
It is. And this commitment to quality is balanced by their culture of speed and experimentation. They have this principle called shipping it, which is all about minimizing the gap between thought and action.
Okay, I'm all for moving fast. But how do they avoid sacrificing quality for speed? That seems like a tough balance to strike.
They have systems in place to support that. For instance, they built a custom tool so product managers can test different versions of notification copy without needing engineers every time. This streamlines the process and allows them to experiment quickly without creating a bottleneck.
So it's about empowering people to move quickly and make decisions without getting bogged down in bureaucracy. And it sounds like this ties into their show don't tell principle as well. What's that all about?
It's about making data-driven decisions. They're big believers in letting results speak for themselves. They have a strong emphasis on TLDRs, executive summaries, that distill complex information into its most essential points.
I love that. It's so easy to get lost in the weeds sometimes. But forcing yourself to summarize something concisely really forces you to think clearly about what really matters. I bet that saves them a ton of time and energy.
It does. And it helps them avoid analysis paralysis. They're not afraid to make a decision and move forward, even if they don't have all the answers.
Now, here's something I've always been curious about. Duolingo's unique approach to humor. They're not afraid to be a little bit, well, unhinged.
That's right. Make it fun is one of their core principles.
Yeah.
It's not just about gamification. They inject humor and surprise into everything they do, from the absurd sentences in their lessons to Duo's evolving personality.
Okay, we have to talk about Duo. He's gone from a cute motivational owl
Yeah.
to, well, something else entirely. He's passive-aggressive. He pops up in the most unexpected places. He's become a meme legend. Have they gone too far? Is it still effective?
It's a fine line they're walking, this wholesome and unhinged brand duality. But so far it seems to be working. They've managed to create a brand that's both educational and entertaining. And let's be honest, in a world where everyone's competing for attention, standing out is crucial.
True. Their April Fool's campaigns are a perfect example. Language learning toilet paper, I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. But it's also brilliant. It gets people talking and keeps their brand top of mind.
Exactly. They're not afraid to take risks and have fun, even if it means not everyone gets the joke. And that's what makes them so engaging.
So how do they actually put all these principles into action? They have this framework called the Green Machine, right?
Yes. It's their 6-step process for continuous improvement. It's all about empowering teams to experiment, gather feedback, and iterate quickly. And it's surprisingly versatile. They use it for everything, from launching new features to improving internal processes.
All right, that's it for part 1 of our deep dive into the Duolingo Handbook. We've covered a lot of ground, from their mission-obsessed culture to their quirky approach to humor. But we're just getting started. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll be exploring even more fascinating insights from this remarkable company.
We'll be back soon. To delve deeper into their brand-building strategies, their approach to engineering, and their monetization model.
Welcome back. We're continuing our deep dive into the inner workings of Duolingo, and this time we're focusing on their brand. What struck me is their ambition. They're not just thinking about the next few quarters, they're literally talking about building a 100-year brand.
Yeah, it's a bold vision, but when you look at how meticulously they've crafted their brand, it starts to make sense. They're not just slapping a logo on things. They're building a world, and their characters are at the heart of it.
Right, those characters are everywhere, but there's so much more than just cute mascots. They have backstories, they have personalities, they even have their own social media accounts. I have to admit, it's pretty effective. I find myself actually caring about what Duo's up to.
It's brilliant marketing, really. In a world of endless distractions, they're creating emotional connections with learners. They're competing with TikTok and Instagram for attention, and they're doing it by making language learning feel like an adventure with these characters as your guides.
It's like they've gamified the whole learning experience, but on a deeper level, you're not just earning points, you're building relationships with these characters. It's almost like they're creating a whole new genre of entertainment.
Exactly. And that's something AI-powered learning tools just can't replicate no matter how sophisticated they become.
Mhm.
Duolingo understands that human connection is a fundamental part of the learning process, and they're leveraging that brilliantly. It's a real differentiator in a crowded market.
Yeah. And let's be honest, Duo has become a global icon. He's on the red carpet. He's starring in fake dating shows. He's got millions of followers on social media. It's wild.
It's all part of their wholesome and unhinged brand duality,
Hmm.
which is such a tightrope walk. But they managed to pull it off. They're playful, they're irreverent, they're not afraid to push the boundaries of good taste, but somehow it all works.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd get away with some of the things Duo does, but I think it's their commitment to the sheer audacity of it all that makes it so disarming. They're clearly not taking themselves too seriously, and that makes them even more likable.
Absolutely. They're not afraid to poke fun at themselves, and that makes them relatable. It's like you're saying, we're all in on this crazy journey of language learning together. Let's have some fun along the way.
Speaking of the learning journey, let's talk about the path. This was a major change to their product, and I remember it being a bit controversial when it first rolled out.
It was a bold move.
Mhm.
They replaced the traditional skill tree where you could jump around to different topics with a linear path where you have to complete each lesson in order.
Right, and some people felt it was too restrictive, that it took away their freedom to learn at their own pace, but what was the thinking behind that?
It all comes back to their commitment to true learning. They found that users who jumped around too much weren't building a solid foundation in the language. They might have been able to string together a few sentences, but their understanding was superficial.
So they were willing to sacrifice some short-term user satisfaction in order to create a more effective learning experience in the long run. Again, it's that take the long view principle in action.
Exactly. And the path allowed them to have more control over the learning process. They could carefully sequence the lessons to ensure users were building their skills progressively, and they could gather better data on user progress to constantly refine the curriculum.
So it was a win-win for both the learners and Duolingo. It allowed them to improve the product while also ensuring users were getting the most out of it now, beyond the product itself. I'm fascinated by their company culture. They call it a quirky culture, which seems about right.
It's definitely unique. They have this tradition called 99 bad ideas, where everyone from interns to executives brainstorm the most outrageous concepts imaginable.
Wait, 99 bad ideas. What's the point of that? Is it just for fun?
It's about pushing the boundaries of creativity and encouraging people to think outside the box. They know that sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places, and that even bad ideas can spark inspiration.
I love that. It sounds like a really fun way to break down barriers and get people thinking creatively. And then there's their annual winter getaway to Cancun.
Ah, yes, legendary no agendas, no work talk, just pure fun and connection. It's their way of showing appreciation for their employees and fostering a sense of community.
It's smart. They understand that happy employees are productive employees, and it's clear that they put a lot of thought into creating a work environment where people feel valued and supported.
Absolutely. And this culture of transparency extends to all levels of the company. They have an open doors policy where even the most senior leaders are accessible to anyone.
So it's not just about having fun parties, it's about creating a culture of trust and open communication.
Exactly. They believe that everyone has something valuable to contribute, and they encourage employees to share their ideas, even if they're crazy or unconventional.
Which probably explains why they're so innovative. They're not afraid to take risks and try new things. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from their wholesome and unhinged branding to their quirky culture, but there's still so much more to unpack.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll be exploring their approach to engineering their monetization strategy and how they put all these principles into action with their green machine framework.
Stay tuned, because it's about to get even more interesting. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the Duolingo Handbook. We've explored their mission, their brand, their culture. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how they actually build and sustain this incredible company. Let's start with their engineering approach. I have to admit, some of it surprised me.
Yeah, it is pretty unique. You'd think a company with such a long-term vision would be obsessed with building systems that last forever. But Duolingo takes a different approach. They actually embrace the idea that technology is constantly evolving and that trying to build something to last for eternity is a fool's errand.
So they're not trying to create these massive monolithic systems that are meant to stand the test of time.
Exactly. They prioritize speed and flexibility over building for permanence. They know that the tech landscape changes so rapidly that anything they build today might be obsolete in a few years.
So how do they balance that need for agility with their long-term vision? It seems like a bit of a paradox.
They found a way to embrace both. They build systems that are robust enough to meet their current needs, but also flexible enough to adapt as technology evolves. They're constantly experimenting, testing new ideas, and iterating on what works. And they only invest heavy engineering resources into something once it's proven successful.
Can you give me a concrete example of how that works in practice?
Sure. Take their video call feature. They initially launched it as a small experiment just to see if there was interest, and when it turned out to be a hit with users, they scaled it up and made it a core part of their product. But they didn't invest a ton of time and resources into building a super sophisticated video calling platform right from the start. They waited until they had validated the idea.
That's so smart. It's like they're constantly testing the waters and only diving in once they're sure it's safe. It reminds me of their show Don't Tell principle.
Exactly. They're data-driven in everything they do.
Yeah.
They don't make decisions based on gut feeling or assumptions. They test, they measure, and they iterate based on the results.
Now let's talk about something that's essential for any successful company making money for years. Duolingo seemed to be laser focused on growth and product development with monetization, almost an afterthought. Was that a deliberate strategy?
They knew that their mission of making education accessible to everyone depended on having a large user base, so they prioritized growth over immediate profits.
Which is admirable, but eventually you have to keep the lights on. So how did they approach building a sustainable business model?
They found a way to monetize without compromising their mission. They introduced a freemium subscription model where users can access a fantastic free version of the app, but also have the option to upgrade to a paid subscription that removes ads and unlocks additional features.
It's a brilliant model. It allows them to generate revenue from users who are willing to pay for a premium experience while still keeping their core product free for everyone else.
And it's been incredibly successful. Their monetization strategy has enabled them to continue investing in innovation and expanding their reach globally. It's a testament to their ability to balance their social mission with their business goals.
It really is. They've shown that you can do good and do well at the same time. Okay, we've talked about their engineering approach, their monetization strategy, their brand, their culture. It's clear they have all these different pieces working together, but how do they orchestrate it all?
That's where the Green Machine comes in. It's their 6-step framework for continuous improvement. It's how they take all these principles and put them into action.
I'm all ears. Break it down for me.
The first step is staff. With great people, this goes back to their rigorous hiring process. They know that having the right people in place is essential for everything else, so that they define success. This is about setting clear, measurable goals for every project or initiative.
So it's not just about having a vague idea of what you want to achieve. You need specific, measurable targets.
Exactly. Then they set guardrails and think long-term. This is about making sure that every decision is aligned with their mission and their long-term vision. They're not afraid to say no to projects that might be profitable in the short term, but don't fit with their overall strategy.
It's about having the discipline to stick to your principles, even when it's tempting to stray.
Right next, they build the thing and set up feedback loops. This is where they put their shipping in. They build principle into practice. They move quickly, they get things out there, and they gather feedback from both data and users.
So it's not just about building in a vacuum. It's about constantly iterating and improving based on real-world feedback.
Exactly. Then they execute with urgency and excellence. This is about moving fast without sacrificing quality. They have a high bar for everything they do.
And finally, they double down on what works, stop what doesn't. This is about being ruthless with prioritization if something isn't working. They're not afraid to cut their losses and move on, even if they've already invested a lot of time and energy into it.
It's a surprisingly simple framework, but it's incredibly effective. It's the engine that drives their continuous improvement and innovation.
Wow, it's like a recipe for success. And it's fascinating to see how all these different ingredients come together. Well, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive into the Duolingo Handbook, from their mission-driven culture and that quirky approach to humor to their innovative engineering practices and their commitment to long-term growth. But I think what's most inspiring is that they've managed to achieve all of this while staying true to their core values. They've shown that it's possible to build a successful business while also making a positive impact on the world.
Absolutely. And they've done it by challenging conventional wisdom and by never being afraid to experiment and try new things. So if you're looking for inspiration for your own work or even just for your own life, I highly recommend checking out the Duolingo Handbook for yourself. It's a treasure trove of insights, and I guarantee you'll come away with some valuable takeaways.
I couldn't agree more. So that's it for this episode of the Duck Dive. We hope you enjoyed this journey into the world of Duolingo as much as we did. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic.